Welcome back to another video on how to decrease anxiety in our personal life. And the next area we're going to talk about is boundaries and overcommitment. We don't really want to feel stretched thin or overwhelmed or like we're constantly showing up for others but not for ourselves. And having boundaries in our lives is actually a really good thing if they're healthy boundaries. There are times where we make unhealthy boundaries due to reactions that we're having. And those are the boundaries we don't want to make, right? We actually want to make them beforehand and really kind of think about what boundaries are best for us, for our personal selves, and what boundaries are best for our relationships and our family members, whether that's immediate family members or extended family members. And we don't ever want to overcommit ourselves. Overcommitting is, maybe us people pleasing, and we don't really want to people please because that's not healthy for us. And sometimes there's a reason why we're doing that, and we should probably look into why we want to overcommit ourselves when in the end we really dread it. So we're going to learn how to stop saying yes when we are burning out on the inside. And so we're going to look at what overcommitment looks like, how to build strong boundaries, what internal boundaries are, and how to finally make space for yourself without feeling guilty. We are important. If we are going to work on our goals and achieve them, we actually do have to have some time where we're going to do that and some boundaries in place for those aspects of us. So how can we get started on this in our life? Well, we can recognize what overcommitment actually is for us. So overcommitment is one of the sneakiest causes of anxiety. It sounds like I said yes, but now I'm dreading it. I'm running from one thing to the next and I cannot breathe. If I stop, everything might fall apart. And obviously, if you hear those sentences, those are all negative sentences that would cause some negative emotions in us and probably some resentment if we overcommitted ourselves. And why do we overcommit ourselves? Well, here's some reasons why we do that. Fear of disappointing others, wanting to feel needed. Maybe you're having some FOMO. That happens quite often. Avoiding discomfort or slowing down. We obviously grow when we're not in our comfort zone, when we're uncomfortable, and if we're feeling discomfort or we don't want to slow down to actually work on some stuff, then overcommitting yourself works really great because then you don't have to. But it isn't great in the end for us. And tying our worth to productivity. Right? The more we get done, the more self-worth we have. And that isn't always the case. So let's ask ourselves, am I saying yes because I want to or because it feels like something that I should do? And of course, if that's the case, we don't want to do that. So what do I hope to gain or avoid by saying yes? Again, it's not just the gaining, it's what are we avoiding as well when we overcommit ourselves. And what does it cost me emotionally, mentally, physically when I say yes too often? And I think a lot of times, people ask us a question if we want to commit ourselves to something, and it's okay to pause and ask them or let them know, not necessarily ask them, that you may need a day or two to think about it or a couple of hours so that you are not just saying yes right off the spot because maybe you feel like you're in some a pressure moment and you feel like you have to say yes because you have to please somebody in that situation. And giving yourself some time to back off might actually help you understand, what it's costing you to do this and is it worth doing it in the end. So awareness is power. You can't set boundaries if you don't first see where you're crossing your own lines. So what's another area of our lives that we can understand boundaries and overcommitment? Well, you can start exploring boundaries and you can start understanding what your internal boundaries are. So boundaries aren't walls, they aren't ultimatums. Sometimes we tend to throw those up as boundaries and think they're boundaries, but we're really reacting to a situation that we haven't had time to process or to really understand and maybe pause and give ourselves a few seconds or a few minutes to respond. But clear lines that protect your time, energy, and peace are what true healthy boundaries really are. And so there are two types of boundaries. So you have your external boundaries. These are the limits we set with others. So these are things like saying no without over explaining or explaining at all. You definitely don't have to tell people why you say no. Not replying to a message instantly. So this is a really great one, especially if it causes us to react or have some sort of strong emotion. We should really be putting the phone down. Asking for space or alone time and stating your availability clearly. And asking for space or alone time doesn't mean that you're not going to come back to the subject, because we should be coming back to whatever we needed to pause. But some of us need some time to process and to really understand, how do I say no, or how do I navigate this situation? And taking a break and giving us some space really helps with that. So an example is, I'd love to help, but I don't have the capacity right now. And you don't owe anyone burnout in exchange for being loved or respected, right? Just because you decide not to do something, that's not where your love is tied to. And if that is what the other person is putting on you, then that's of course on them, and they need to figure that out. And maybe they're overcommitting, and so they want people to help relieve them, and that's not our job to relieve other people of their own mistakes. And then you have internal boundaries, and so these are the ones we hold with ourselves. So not checking emails at midnight, right? Not overbooking your calendar, resisting the urge to fix things for everyone else, and allowing yourself to rest without guilt. Rest is really great, and it's really important for us. So try saying, I've done enough for today. I don't need to attend every crisis to be a good person, and I can pause before committing. These boundaries reduce mental clutter and give your nervous system room to breathe. And by mental clutter is when we overcommit ourselves or don't have healthy boundaries in place internally or externally. What happens is we tend to overthink those situations, and then those cause us to increase the negative emotions we don't want. And so it's really important to have these boundaries before we get into situations, so we aren't having a lot of the mental clutter, and we're not really just having all those negative emotions, and that it's affecting our other parts of our lives. So we don't want to do the things that we want to do to move forward in our lives. And what's another area that we can work on boundaries? Well, with our relationship boundaries and making space for ourselves. So healthy relationships have healthy boundaries, and without them, anxiety builds, resentment can grow, and we start to feel invisible. So you might notice you're always the helper, but you're rarely being helped. You avoid conflict to keep the peace, and you say yes with a smile and cry in private later. So it's not selfish to protect your peace, it's essential. And really it's up to you to make your own boundaries. You cannot expect somebody else to do it for you, and you cannot expect them to read your mind to understand that your boundary is being pushed. This is where the hard work comes on the inside, where we learn how to effectively communicate our emotions and our needs to the other people in our lives. So try this language. If this doesn't work for me, I care about you, and I also need space. I want to show up with a full heart, and that means honoring my limits. And then the final step here is to make space for yourself. Build an intentional time to rest, reflect, create, move, and just be. Not because you earned it by doing enough, but because you exist. You have your own needs, right? And you deserve to feel whole. So here's a journal prompt that you could use during your alone time. What would it look like to live with more space, more ease, and more self-honoring choices? Again, space for yourself is so important, and it shows yourself that you care, and other people that you're putting yourself first, and that you are important. And then it leaves us the ability, because it fills up our cup and our energy, if we can create and have some downtime and just breathe, to be able to do the things that we need to during the day for others, or for just our just our everyday life, really, in the end. And so start by noticing where you're overcommitting out of fear, not love. Set boundaries that protect your peace with others and with yourself. And finally, make space in your life where your nervous system can just exhale and be for a while. And so boundaries are love in action, especially when directed inward. Again, don't feel guilty for having your boundaries. They're great to have, and they're really important. And they show people, and especially our kids, that boundaries are positive things in our lives. So here we are at the comment section. I would love to hear if you struggle with setting boundaries. This is something hard that does not come easy, and that you're working on it. Are you at the beginning of this journey? Are you kind of in the middle trying to figure it out still? Or have you been able to set up some really great boundaries and been able to really stick with those boundaries? And when you do set up great boundaries and stick with them, are you able to tell people about them without getting emotional, right? Because we have healthy boundaries. We still maybe have a hard time communicating those healthy boundaries, and we really need to work on that. And role playing is great for that. You could use a mirror, you could use an empty chair, you could use somebody else. So I'd love to hear the comments, and I would love to get the conversation started. And then lastly, I have a journal again, which is all about you are discovering yourself, you're loving yourself, and you are disciplined for yourself. And so self-love reminds us that we're worthy, not someday, but now. Self-discovery invites us to listen to our own voice, to reconnect with who we really are beneath the noise of it all. And self-discipline, that is the quiet commitment to keep showing up for ourselves even when it's hard. So this journal is your space. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about tuning in and being honest and holding space for your healing, your growth, and your truth. And so take a deep breath, grab a pen, and begin on your journey.